another Aligner Insider podcast. Well, hello everybody in podcast land, and welcome to another Aligner Insider podcast. I am Dean Steinman, President of Ortho Marketing, and to my right today is the world famous Dr. Barry Glaser. How are you today, Barry?
I'm well, Dean. How are you?
I am well, thank you. And we are really excited to have with us to our left Dr. Rooz Khosravi. Rooz is an orthodontist and consultant and all-around great guy as well. And we're really excited to have him here join us to talk a little bit about technologies, about digital orthodontics, trends going down in the industry, and to get you guys up to stuff. Today is the 11th day of January 2021, and some pretty crazy stuff for the last week or so. So hopefully things are calming down a bit, and we're able to get back to the new normal. With that said, Rooz, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it. So let's get right to it. Tell us, who is Rooz Khosravi, and what made you become an orthodontist, consultant, business person?
First, I wanted to thank you for the opportunity. It's a pleasure to be on the podcast. I've heard some of the episodes and enjoyed them. So thanks again for having me on.
Oh, our pleasure.
So a little bit about, how my, basically journey ended up in orthodontics. My path was a little bit of an unconventional. My parents, one of them, my dad is an engineer and my mom was a dentist. So I was always into kind of, the border of, engineering mind and then the medicine. And my mom used to work in a hospital, which was like a teaching hospital. So I spent a lot of times with physician and dentist. And, kind of like I ended up going to dentistry, even that I was initially thinking about medicine. And then in dental school, I met a professor who was trained as an oral biologist. So that's where everything triggers on like research. And when I finished, I ended up doing a master degree in epidemiology, and then later on moved to more basic science. I did a PhD in bone biology. When I get to the end of my PhD, I was like, okay, so now this is the time after, I don't even know, like 7, 8 years of postgraduate schooling, and then 5, 6 years of dental school. So I was like, okay, I need to make a decision.
Exactly.
And then,
Time to get a real job.
I know exactly. So I interviewed in a few postdoc positions because I was like, okay, I'm going to become a scientist and just like have a lab and do some research. And then, going through a few of those job interviews, and, it was great places. I interviewed at Stanford, I interviewed at NIH,
Wow.
great mentors, but it was unclear of, even if I pick one of those positions, then go, it was unclear of how to navigate, the life of a principal investigator where you get grant money. Things were getting a little bit more complicated. The success rate of getting those grants was a little bit lower. So then the alternative was like, okay, let's think about going back to clinic. And it's so interesting because when I interview with Martha Summerman, who was the chair of or the director of NIDCR, back, in Bethesda, she said something to me that it kind of like hit the point, and she was like, you want to also think about clinic. I mean, she's a periodontist and a researcher, and then I came back and think a little bit more about it, and I was like, okay, let's look at the clinic. What are the options that I have? I did a lot of research in perio and bone biology, so the two choices that I had was like, okay, let's think about perio or ortho. And I had a friend, Dr. Vora, who is a professor at UBC now. He started his ortho program at the University of Washington. And then I called him. I was like, Sid, what do I have to do? He's like, apply for ortho. This is something that you would like. I know the way that you think about stuff. He was like a year ahead of me in the PhD program. So then I applied to ortho. And then, I ended up becoming an orthodontist. And I feel like all the training that I had before kind of, created this whole path of, being an orthodontist, but at the end of the day, doing some research and, trying to create new stuff. I think some of those are stemmed from those other training that I had.
And what when you started becoming an orthodontist, what did you like best about it? What made you get up in the morning and smile? because think you're in the smile business. I said to all my clients, you're in the smile business. Your job is to make people smile.
For sure.
So becoming an orthodontist, what made you happy? What made you smile in your early stages there?
I think one of the challenges that I had in the early days of being a resident in the ortho program is just like, the battle of day-to-day battle of between being a clinician and thinking as a clinician, being a scientist and thinking about a macro level. And I feel like what gets me very excited is to live in these two worlds where you look from a smaller level and think about the cells and how things moves, and then you get somebody that you sit in front of and talk about them and talking about moving their teeth and talking about the impact that you have in their life. I think those are the things that gets me excited, like the way that you can see the transition from a small level to a larger level impact that you would have in people's life.
Hmm,
And then obviously
great.
the
So
digital technology is just like, get me going every day, all day. How can I do it
sure.
digitally? It's, that's
So let's
one
talk
of the
about that next step. So how did you venture on into the digital consulting business world?
So I think, interesting technology is not something that it happened overnight. I was always one of those kids that, set up my own computer, go to the, store, whatever place that we had back home and buy just little pieces and putting together and have a new computer. So I was
Right.
always into technology. And I think starting one of the first experience that I had with digital technology during my residency, we had these motion view software at the department. And I started one of the faculty, Dr. Walash, and she helped me to start playing with it. And then, it's just like, okay, now we need to move the teeth. Like, how are we going to move the teeth? And then I have no idea what orthodontics is. And I spent like 3 days figuring out this software, how to move the teeth. And, and obviously, the more that you do it, the more that you get excited about it. And then 3D printing came through. And it's kind of like, one day after another, you just kind of, it pulls you through to that, or at least this is what happened to me. It just kind of took me to that path.
Hmm.
So now, based on your background, now you become, one of the world authorities on, 3D printing and in-house aligners and that sort of thing. So, based on your experience, can you tell us, what do you do now with your training and experience in regards to supporting orthodontists and their teams in adapting digital orthodontics within their clinics, to provide that kind of like, individualized care to their patients?
It's a great question, really good question. So I thought about this a little bit because it's kind of like one of those things that you want to check everything with yourself after a while. Like, what am I doing? So
Hmm.
if I summarize all the activities that I'm doing, there are kind of two folds. One part that I'm trying to work on is the education. Like, I went through this path, I did so many mistakes. How can I pass it on and try to help people to not do the mistakes that I've been doing? That's one path, and I'll get more into details in a sec about it. The other part is the consultant working with other companies like ULab or Bay Materials, Spinray. Is like, okay, so I'm the clinician who understand the clinic part of it, and I like to hang out with the engineers and talk about, basically critically looking at things and analyzing and creating features. So one part of my activities goes toward development, innovation in the space of digital orthodontics. So
Hmm.
that's kind of like, I spend about 10 to 20% of my week goes through just talking, working with engineers, adding new features, revisiting the current features. And for the education part, I set up a study club called Digital Orthodontics Hub. And what I do through that, I set up 3 layers of educational training. One is an on-demand courses that people can take it. They can, watch these videos that we created. We put them on a Slack channel. They can ask questions. It's kind of like do it at your pace whenever you want to do it. The other layers of training is that for people that they want to do one-to-one and have some more personalized training, we set up, appointment. We talk about it. We do actually like a video type of a thing, Zoom or FaceTime. When we look at the clinic, I talk to them about, what are their plan is, where do they want to go, where they are, and then we slowly build a really customized plan of implementing these into their clinic. And the third layer is, was in-person courses that we had it, you know, in 2019 and then 2020 because of the pandemic, everything stopped. But I'm hoping that end of 2021 we take that back on because there's a lot of value into one-to-one person or like a group setting, training. It helps a lot to learn from them. And kind of showing the people that we're all kind of in the same page a little bit up and down, and you can take on these, even that it feels or maybe a huge endeavor to take.
Mhm.
Hmm. So, talk a little bit about that. So now that you working with an orthodontist practice or clinic, and you work with them as far as helping them bring in digital technologies to their practice. Um, how do you umbrella or position digital orthodontics in 2021? How would you describe what digital orthodontics is now? Because obviously everybody you ask can give you a different answer to that. So to you, you know, how would you answer that question?
Yeah,
Digital orthodontics is what?
I think that's a great question. To me, when I look at the digital orthodontics, is a huge topic. It's a big things. And when I look at it, if I want to define it very like from a macro level, to me, it's how to use technology into your day to day practice. It doesn't always have to be that making aligners in your lab. It could be what kind of task management software you're going to use, or what kind of scheduling that you would run, or like, because it's all kind of tie into each other. Like, it's, if
Hmm.
you take on that trend, you can do simple things and see a huge impact. So in 2021, the way that I look at it, when people ask, I think there are so many different trends going on, but I think one thing that is going to happen more and more is people start printing in-house for whatever reason that they decide to use. Like, and the easiest path to enter to the whole platform is to buy a printer, whatever that you like, that is going to fit your budget, your needs, and all those things, and start playing with it a little bit for a few months, to learn how to print these models. And then when you print those models, you can use them for different things. You can make retainer, you can make aligners, you can just use it as a diagnostic tool. So that's where I feel like the digital technologies, the kind of like the gateway is going to be starting by buying a printer, and then taking on more and more as you go forward.
Hmm. How do people? How does an orthodontist who is not per se educated in the digital space even know what they don't know? How do they even know what's available or what they need? And besides the fact that okay, I'll just use Invisalign or I'll just use this. Why? How do they even know that there are options out there? What makes them realize that okay, really, I do need to take my practice to the next level, and I need to implement 3D printing or in-house aligners. How do they even know that this is there and they even need it?
I, I think one of the things that I like about orthodontists, like in general, I think it's in our all kind of like it's on our blood, I guess. After a while, we look into try to improve system. I haven't met an orthodontist that is telling me that, okay, I'm not going to change anything this year. I'm just going to keep going whatever that I have. We talk to each other. We go to meetings, and read blogs and on Facebook groups, and I feel like it's a kind of a trend that people look into each other and try to growth. And part of the growth maybe is implementing digital technology. So I would say, um, there is not one specific resource. I mean, obviously, I have a course. There are other courses out there that people can look into, but there is no cohesive, resources that you can go and take it, because it also people. I mean, this is forming. This is the digital orthodontics is in this very early ages. Like, it's morphing. Like, we're still trying to morph
Hmm.
these things and shape it, and everybody has a different definition for it. So I feel like that's a big challenge for people that they want to take on that, especially if they're not really into digital technology. Then they're like, well, where am I going to start? So
Right.
I think it's a huge challenge. I completely am with you on the existence of these challenges. What are we going to do about it? I think as we do more and we learn more and we look at optimizing these things, it will only going to get better.
Bruce, now talk about challenge, perfect segue. So what's the biggest challenge you've faced in helping a practice adapting digital technologies to that practice, and how'd you overcome it?
I think when you think about implementing any system, you go buy a fax machine, you come and put it in the clinic. It's a change, and nobody likes changes generally, because these practices are busy. There are a lot of system going on. So when you put another little piece into the equation, you're kind of creating a off balance situation for the whole team. So I think one thing that I want to say is that you need to acknowledge that there's a challenge, and there's going to be changes, and you need to like dissect it pretty well. with your team, bring it up, discuss it, and then start small. Like, it could be, you buy a printer. You don't need to start, making all your retainers tomorrow with digital printer. You can buy the printer. You can start, do a few for the team, and then do a few from those special patient that you feel that they're comfortable if you do something wrong. So
Mhm.
I think it's more, and the key in all of these is that everybody in a practice should be on board. Because digital technology, one person is not on board, then it's just going to create a lot of, polarization between the team. And then it's like, okay, the printer is going to create, I mean, the things that you hear it's a resin, is dangerous. I mean, yes, the resin can be problematic, but if you read the instruction, if you follow up the protocol, you can implement it, it's not going to be a problem.
Wow. But
Hmm,
so I just wanted to maybe just expand
sure.
on that a little bit. So, Ruz and I had actually been in contact last year, and he got me all primed that I was ready to get a 3D printer, and then COVID hit, and I had concerns about cash flow and blah blah blah. But so if I'm going to go out in 2021, and I have, I mean, obviously I outsource all my aligners, through Invisalign. So if I decided I wanted to dip my toe into the 3D printing waters for the first time, what printer are you recommending these days?
I think there's a lot of options out there. It all depends on, what exactly, like, where do you want to start and where you want to go. So I think if people are willing to spend a little bit more money, I like the Sprint Ray Pro. That's what I use in the clinic most of the time. And, full disclosure, I work with a company, so there's a bias in there. I like Formlab printers because they're very simple, easy to use. They're kind of user friendly. They're slow, and that's kind of like the disadvantage of those printers. And then if you're like, I don't want to spend any money on this, this is too much, and as you mentioned, like, we're still kind of like tiptoeing on a little bit of a getting back to normalcy. There are printers from Frozen Sonic Mini. 4K is a really good one. The challenge with these LCD, inexpensive printers, is that you need to spend a little time to try to learn it. I noticed that the company actually created a really nice website and have some videos that you can watch. So Frozen Sonic Mini 4K is what
And these
I,
are all like in the hundreds of dollars, right?
yeah, they're like $300 to $400. Yeah,
Crazy.
and then the resin is cheaper too. But it's not. You can't really compare these printers. I mean, people look at this as like, okay, so I have a printer that's going to print 6 models in 40 minutes, and everything is optimized. It's better than a sprint rate. Why do I need to spend $8,000 or $7,000 in sprint rate? There, it's just like an apple and orange. You can't compare these things together. I mean, sprint rate is an ecosystem with, wash, with the cure, with the printer, with the resin. Everything is optimized. There's a customer service. Yes, they're working on making it better. Same thing with Formlab. Like most of these, well, more established practices, you pay more for the printer, but you get a lot of support that comes with that. As opposed to like the LCD printers are cheap. There's a lot of challenges associated with that. I mean, the resins are not consistent. You need to do a lot of calibration. The sizes are going to be off. But if you buy one of these inexpensive and start playing with it,
Mhm,
it's a gateway to start expanding.
mhm,
And it goes back to the personality of the people. Like, some people are like, I don't have enough time to spend to try to figure out these printers. So I'm just going to buy one from a company. They're going to give me a little handbook that is going to explain how it works. And there's some training on it, and I'll just take on that. So
mhm.
I would say the two camp that I see are people that they like to go with an inexpensive. They're willing to spend a little more time and figure it out. And they're going the group of people that they go with the Sprint Ray Pro or Formlab, and they're just kind of like they want to do a little bit more like ready to use kind of platforms.
So an investment for like Sprint Ray Pro with the your resin and all the other goodies that come along with it. Is it under $10,000?
Yes, if you, yeah, correct. It should be under 10 with the wash and the cure and the print, because you need a little bit more than just the printer. You need the wash to wash the parts, and you need the cure to cure the parts. So those are all costs that are associated
Mhm.
with the whole things that you can bring it in.
Gotcha.
Hmm. And so, what is the biggest myth out there about digital printers that people don't understand that you want to debunk now?
I think you know let's just go a little bit bigger than printer, just
Okay.
digital technology. Like,
Sure.
what is the
Okay.
biggest problem that, or the myth that people think that implementing digital technology? I think the assumption is that if you want to implement digital technology, if you want to adapt to all these changes, you need to go through clear aligner therapy. And I think that's inaccurate. When you think about one set of aligners per se, it's one of the least efficient appliances in orthodontics. So I feel like, implementing digital technology, aligner is definitely one of the first one that push us to do that. And I think Align did a great job in pushing and carrying all these for many, many years to get it to the point that it is right now. And their changes are coming in. And I feel like implementing digital technology, even with the fixed appliances, it can be doable. So it's not only with aligner. I think that's kind of like a general statement about digital technology and things that people should think a little bit bigger than just the aligners for the digital technology.
Hmm. So
Excuse me.
when you've worked with a practice or a clinic and you've helped them with implementing digital platforms to the office, what's the best feedback you received from them, one way or the other, positive or negative? Because obviously, change is tough. Barry and I talk about this all the time. People have to adapt these days, and we've mentioned this many, many times on this other podcasts. You have to adapt or die, and you have to, in order to position yourself using the newest technologies and offering the best of the best, you have to have digital, plain and simple. We're not in the analog world anymore. So, what feedback have you received from somebody, one way or the other, as far as the whole digital world?
I think one thing that I've been learning and I'm trying to like actually adapt myself with this is that people start with so many different baseline knowledge. Like, you pick practice one and practice two, and they, based on the team that they have, based on the way that they operate, they would require really completely different training to get them to all come into the same level. So I think, and that's a huge challenge in terms of the educational part of these digital technologies. So uh, I think that kind of like the takeaway from all these trends that I see is that, you got to be patient a little bit. You got to put a lot of training because, you might get some assistant that they're really good. Like I do have an assistant, like Rachel is one of my really great assistant. She's not really good with the technology, but she's willing to spend time with me and learn it, but she's an amazing assistant with 20 something years of experience. So I think we need to like make sure that we get a really good training for all of our team, including even the front desk should know what does it mean when you try to bring digital technology to your clinic. Because for example, making in-house aligners, there's a lot of other part that needs to be working all in synced with each other, because if they're not working, then the scheduling is going to be off, the fabrication is going to be off, because you're bringing the whole production line into your clinic. So
Right.
it's extremely important to know that every aspect of the clinic has to adjust to these changes.
And how do you get them on board? That's the hardest thing that I have as trying to implement marketing strategies to get them on board and to think out of the box. So, what's the biggest hurdle that you faced in that in trying to get them to do? Except that the staff involved, and Barry could say this too. That it's not the easiest thing to get them to change and to get on board and to do something different or new. So, how do you work with that? How do you get them to? Obviously, the doctor says one thing and the staff says another, and you say another. So, what's the protocol is to get everybody on the same page?
I think that's $1 million question, right?
Right?
Uh,
Exactly.
or at least this is how I do it. Personally, I have a great team. I'm so fortunate to have everybody that is willing to take any crazy ideas that I bring to the clinic tomorrow. The way that I do it, I kind of dissect it a little bit. I explain why we're doing what we're doing. We set up a really clear protocol, like itemized checklist that this is what we're trying to do, and then I get feedback on those. Make sure everybody's on board. Make sure nobody has any objection on those, because if they're not comfortable with what we're all going to do, if even one person is not comfortable with what we're going to do, this is going to fall apart. So I think the why part of it, then the checklist or a protocol, we review it and we start practicing it. And the other thing that we need to do is to come back, and every quarter we have a meeting where we sit and discuss all these things. And there were a lot of things that I had in my mind that is going to be good way to go about it, and we started using it, and my team actually morphed that things and shaped it better than what I thought in my mind. So I think getting them involved is the key. Like they should be a part of it. If I am going to be the only one who's going to drive this, it generally doesn't go that easy.
The feeling, it's hard to drive that bus by yourself, isn't it?
Exactly.
I know the feeling very, very well. um, so now I'm going to ask you to put on your really cool crystal ball glasses. Okay, and where do you see the orthodontic industry in the next 12 to 24 months as far as technology, especially digital technology, goes?
I think the fixed appliances are getting smarter, and the digital technology is actually kind of getting more, kind of improving the fixed appliances that we have. There's a bunch of companies that you can see. So I feel like there will be a little bit of a, oscillation of, you get the pendulum to swing different direction, and finally it's going to sit in that neutral position. I think we're going to get more fixed appliances, into the market along with aligners. Maybe even people are going to look more into hybrid treatment and combo treatment. The way that I describe these two a little bit differently. To me, a hybrid treatment is when you combine two appliances at the same time, you know, for the treatment. Let's say, for example, you have lingual braces in the bottom and then a liner in the top, or vice versa, or whatever combination that you're creating it. And when you think about a combination treatment, is when you have, one set of appliances at any given time, and then you move from one to another. So I think one of the trend that is kind of like taking on is people start with fixed appliances and then switch to a liner. The advantage to this is that patient feels that they're progressing through the treatment, and they're like, smaller time being in braces and then switch to a liner and finish it. Obviously this is not that easy. There's a lot of challenge associated with it. You need to be careful to not spend too much money on these different appliances. So I have a feeling that we'll see more of these hybrid and tandem combination treatments, in orthodontics, and because also there are a lot of companies that are offering these kind of, smaller size aligners. The choices are so many, and then maybe because of the competition, the prices are also going down. So that actually helps to implement these kind of, tandem treatments, that you're combining two appliances into two phases, or two stages of the treatment.
So, Bruce, how do you keep up to date with new technologies, new trends, and how do you determine what to consult with or bring to a practice? Like, obviously, obviously see a lot of things coming on out there. You follow the new trends. So how do you keep up to date with what's going on? How do you learn about newer technologies, and then from there, how do you determine this? How do you sift through it and say,
Hmm.
oh, this is the one that I'm going to be talking about and helping, implement and bring to the table there.
I think there is no. I don't have a specific recipe for that or any specific plan. I just, I think when you're excited about technology, you kind of like find things, even if you're not trying to find things. So
Right. Mhm.
I would say that in the world of orthodontics, there's a bunch of publication that come out, orthodontic products or something, and I watch those or read those. I have a bunch of newsletter that I sign in, but as the product, and also because part of my job is to work with these companies, so these things will come up and we think about it and discuss it. So I see things before even they're completely unfolding into the market. So that's kind of another advantage of, one of those pros and cons of working with industry. You get firsthand of a lot of things. And then outside of orthodontics, I feel like, the digital trend, there's a lot of changes coming in with the scanner, and I feel like, so I actually bought a facial scanner after 5 years of looking for that. I remember when I was in AAO 4 or 5 years ago, when I was in like first, second year of residency, even I think maybe more, 7 years ago. And when I asked people like, do you have a facial scanner that I can scan the face of my patient, they were laughing at me. And now finally I just got one actually from China, and I'm playing with that. It's very impressive, and I feel like that's another change that we'll see. Facial scanners, and with the newer iPhone and other phones are going to try to let us do these kind of changes.
And as far as you're saying, besides the orthodontic world, just in general, what's your go-to as far as just keeping up to date with anything from business ideas to education to whatever. You have a favorite podcast, a website, a book that you go to that you just like to read or listen to or keep up to date with. It doesn't have to be from orthodontic world. It could be just self help. It could be business in general. It could be something that makes you smile. Is there anything that's your go to?
Sure. It's so I started, you know, following I started switching a little bit more into these platform called Medium. I don't know if you ever heard about it. It's kind of like a glorified, 2.0 blogging, and people write a lot of stuff. So I have a few authors that I follow on Medium, and I really like the platform. Like, things are written pretty good, and some people are actually providing a lot of good information. As far as podcast, I really like the one by Eric Ries. It's called Out of the Crisis. I like that. I mean, he started it around the pandemic, and then for books,
You heard of the one called the Liner Insider podcast, right?
absolutely,
You heard-
that's
There
that's
you
the
go. That's
show
what I thought you
up,
were
and
saying.
we'll listen to it every time. No, in terms of the ortho stuff and non-ortho stuff, yeah, I really like Eric Ries' podcast. He diving into a lot of things that people just never think about it. And one of the book that I'm reading right now that I really like it by Scott Galloway is called um, Out of Pandemic. And actually, let me just find out what is the actual name. Um, he wrote it during the pandemic, which was very interesting, and it's called Post Corona. And he started like dissecting things very interestingly, and all these changes that is happening, and some are going to stay, some are going to go away. um I don't have anything specific. I'm like always look.
That's fine. It's always changing, which is good.
Exactly.
It's funny, I go back to old schools. Like I've been I keep on track of stuff, and it's funny. I blew off the dust of one of my favorite go-to books that started about 35 years ago, which is How to Win Friends and Influence
Great.
People.
Yeah,
And
that's a good one.
it's funny how that is
Really
still very, very relevant. 60 years after it was written,
very
and it's incredible.
They
You
should
know,
make that should be required reading for everybody in Congress.
period. Yeah, right.
true. For sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Um, and lastly, what advice would you give an orthodontist who's looking to open up a practice in 2021? Because obviously, if you started from scratch,
Correct.
what advice would you give to them as far as from a digital standpoint?
I think what I would say, the first thing is that figure out why you're doing this, because and what is your brand, what is your style, what are you promising? I think Seth Godin has these kind of concept that he always say that the brand is what you promise to your clients, your patients. So figure out what you're exactly trying to do for your patient, and what is these special things that you're going to offer that maybe people around you are doing the same thing, but what are you doing? Like, I think that's the key to dial down first, and then start looking at all the alternative. I think knowing what is out there is extremely important, because then either you pick something that is a little bit different. Like, you can purchase a practice if you are you found something that you really wanted it. But if you want to do startup, if you know what is out there, you never second guess yourself. You're just going to say, like, this is what I saw, this is what I decided to do, and you're just going to keep driving it. And I feel like implementing digital technology is one of those things that if you're building it now, you want to build something that is going to last for a long time, and the trend is going that direction. So you definitely by incorporating digital technology, you're building your practice for to thrive more and more as you get a little bit older and age the practice.
This podcast is brought to you by Ortho Marketing. Ortho Marketing is a full-service digital marketing agency exclusively for dentists and orthodontists, providing website design, social media management, search engine optimization, and digital advertising. For more information, visit orthomarketing.com.
So, Ruse, maybe in wrapping up, what do you think? What do you think? Where do you think we're going to be in, let's say, it's more short term? Let's say over the next year. What do you think that, as hopefully practices, are emerging from COVID funk? I mean, let's make some assumptions. Let's assume that mass vaccination kind of takes hold, and that within, let's say, maybe the back half of 2021, that maybe things will start to resemble at least some degree of normalcy, both from a public health standpoint as well as politically. And So maybe for like folks like me who are really haven't jumped on the bandwagon, like what would you recommend for a newbie like me to do? And let's say June 1st, and I say, okay, June 1st, this is the second half of the year. This is when I'm going to start to get into the 3D printing game. So what do I do first?
I think that if you put all your calculation spreadsheet and you're like ready to roll, I
Mhm.
would say buy a 3D printers. SpinRay Pro is a good start, and then start printing, and then just do retainer for a quarter or even 2 quarters. Just do retainers, and then that way you get comfortable with fabricating the retainer, the system. You know, because the one thing, I mean, you mentioned that you're outsourcing it, so when you check mark on the clean check where like you submit everything, then it's other somebody else's problem, right? But when you do it in house, then it's your problem. So you want to create that flow of like from the scan till you get that appliance in your hand. What are the steps that you need to do? And when
Mhm.
you dial that step, they're very very similar between retainer and aligners. I
Mhm.
mean, the scale of it is a little bit different. So I would say buy a printer, start offering the retainer, and then build a really nice retainer program into your clinic, because I guess most of the orthodontists are not doing it, which gets me super excited because I feel like those days are gone where the patient will lose their retainer and then they forget about it, and then 3 years later they come to your clinic and see a relapse.
Mhm.
So I would say retainer, a really good retainer program, and then focus on that, and then start doing mild movement. And I feel like when you dial this down, then automatically you're going to start kind of start tweaking with the teeth. It's just like that's the nature of an orthodontist. You get a model, you always find like 1 degree of rotation that you want to take care of it.
You bet. Yeah.
That that is kind of comes with the retainer when it's in your hand. And I think so ULab has this new pricing, which I'm excited about it. And I say this with no intention. I mean, obviously I work with a company, but you
Yeah.
can
No,
just,
I think it's fine. We definitely want to hear about this kind of stuff.
so now you don't need to have any commitment to the software. Like you can just sign in for the software and use that, and you pay $2.50 per SDL. And people are like, well, I can do it in Mesh Mixer and it's going to cost me $0. And I agree with that. But the challenge is that you need to spend a lot of time and you need to use a software that is not optimized for that purposes. I
Mhm.
mean, with ULab, you can define the cut of your retainers, your models. You can digitally do a lot of block out. I've seen people that they actually save $2.50 by spending half 5 to 10 minutes of their team to try to do all these block out, buy all these gel, and then so go through complete digital. Like you want to get the scan of a patient and create that retainer completely without any issue that you would have. So you basically do completely digital. You start from you know buying that, getting your scan out, um bring it to the software, modify it however you want to do your setup also, do your blockout also digitally, and then export it out and then make your retainer. So I would say the retainer protocol actually going to take a long time to completely dial it down in a perfect way. Then you can switch to aligners and minor movement with aligners. If you don't want to go on the spectrum of like complete full-fledged in-house aligners, having an in-house aligner system in your clinic is a toolkit. It's something that can be very handy if you use it in different things.
No, I think that makes sense. The progression of playing around with it, figuring out where the on switch is first, and then
Exactly.
graduating to having a flow, being able to produce a retainer, having your staff do that, and then as I think you're right, I could just imagine then a case comes in and you're like, you know what, I want to bump that lateral incisor just a bit, and then that's like kind of like the next step, and then take it from there. I think it makes a lot of sense. I think I'd love to have you back on soon because I think also there's a lot of people I think like me. I mean, I don't know, maybe I'm getting old, but I think there's a lot of people like me that really sort of like need to go back to the beginning. So it'd be great if maybe we could do if you'd like to come back doing the podcast and let's say talk even about the different technologies because I know there's different printer technologies. They work different, the pros and cons, the accuracy. I think and the fact that you're an engineer makes it great. But I think I'd love if you have some time, maybe coming up in the next couple of weeks, to really go into the weeds, of the science and the technology behind these printers because I think probably most orthodontists are. we probably all had the stereo equipment, right, Dean?
Part of the AV squad.
An
Yep,
orthodontist. So,
exactly.
we all had, the stereo equipment, and the back in the day with the turntables, and the wow and the flutter and the cartridge, and
Yep.
all the total harmonic distortion. I mean, I think we all kind of orthodontists tend to be very detailed oriented. So I definitely love to learn more about the technology that goes into 3D printing, and then maybe you'll also learn a little bit more about like how like something like the ULab software dovetails with that too. So I mean,
Absolutely.
I mean, it's just so interesting. I feel like we're just scratching the surface. So yeah, we definitely
Mhm.
love to have you back.
And
Absolutely. Yeah,
Bruce,
I
if somebody
appreciate
wanted to get in touch with you or get more information, what's the best way for them to do so?
You can look me up on Facebook and message me. That's kind of like the conventional or the
Okay,
easiest way. You can also email me at khosravi, or you can
perfect.
text my phone number 617-466-9090.
Perfect. Great. Well, Bruce, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate everything. This is great information. I'm excited to learn more about this and to do this again with you. I'm really interested in new technologies and especially the digital world. And this is really great stuff. I'm really excited that you joined us. So thank you so much for being part of this. Everybody out there in podcast land, if you want more information, please reach out to Ruse or message us, and we'll be able to make an intro to you as well. And once again, everybody, thank you for being an insider. So, with that said, this is Dean Steinman and Dr. Barry Glaser, and wish everybody out there a very, very, very happy 2021. Be safe and keep smiling. Thanks, everybody. Bye
Thank you.
bye.